In Pinellas County, at an emergency meeting, Clearwater City Council members voted to close Clearwater beaches.
That's harmful to humans is spreading from Florida's Gulf Coast to Atlantic beaches for the first time in more than a decade.
Florida's coast has gone quiet, but not because of hurricanes or sharks. One by one, roads were blocked off, beaches emptied, and the crowds disappeared without warning. Authorities stayed silent, and locals were left in the dark. But now it's clear. Something strange has been found beneath the waves. So strange, it's brought in the National Guard and flown in experts from across the country. This isn't a storm. This is something no one saw coming, and it's unfolding just below the surface. Let's get into it. Florida's underwater giant. The first warning signs didn't come with sirens or breaking news. They came from fishermen, guys who knew the Gulf Coast like the back of their hand.
It was the pain mostly, but I had like little blisters starting to form on my hand.
Suddenly picking up strange vertical shapes on sonar. These weren't reefs or rocks. They looked too perfect, too sharp. At first, people thought it might be just another sunken ship. Florida's waters are full of old wrecks. But when divers finally got down there, what they found was way beyond anything they expected. Buried under 30 feet of water and layers of thick silt was a massive metallic structure, geometric, precise, and warm to the touch.
It absorbs limestone and it creates rock, and so it builds layer after layer.
It wasn't built like anything on Earth. No bolts, no rust, just one solid, smooth surface. It stood taller than a 2-story building and was covered in strange markings. No letters, no symbols, just patterns that made no sense. The structure even pulsed with a soft rhythm that made some divers feel lightheaded. And then things started glitching. Compasses spun out. Depth readers went blank. Even encrypted radios stopped working near the thing. Within 2 days, the situation exploded. The Department of Homeland Security stepped in. The Navy sent out ships. Black helicopters hovered overhead. Floodlights lit up the shoreline at night like it was a military base. Hotels near the water were emptied. Residents were ordered to stay indoors. And then came the headline moment. Florida's beaches were shut down. Everyone within a 50-mile radius. No reason was given except one phrase: national security risk. That's when things got even weirder. Satellite images disappeared from public sites. Marine tracking apps suddenly stopped showing ships anywhere near the zone. Ocean researchers tried to get close and were turned away. Some even threatened with arrest. Even major news networks were left scrambling. Updates came in vague statements and grainy leaked footage from anonymous sources. At that point, the story was no longer just about what was found. It was about what was being hidden. Still, a few clues got out. A diver from an early private team said the edges of the structure were razor-sharp, perfectly intact, and surrounded by warm water. Fish wouldn't come near it. There were no barnacles, no algae, no sign that life had ever touched it. When geologists got core samples from it, they were stumped. The material didn't match any known alloy or metal composite, and under powerful microscopes, the surface showed tiny patterns, so precise they had to be artificial. Yet there were no tool marks anywhere. Meanwhile, things on land took a turn. Tourists vanished. Shops near the coast closed down. People started complaining about flickering electricity, weird phone issues, and even faint auroras lighting up the night sky, something almost unheard of that far south. Some locals claimed to hear a low droning sound at odd hours. Offshore, submarines were spotted near the horizon, while special research subs operated in complete silence. And according to someone familiar with deep-sea operations, the structure wasn't just sitting there, it was slowly shifting below the surface. Ground-penetrating sonar hinted that what we could see was only a fraction of what lay hidden. The rest might stretch for over a mile underground. Nobody could agree on how it got there. Some believed a tectonic shift uncovered it. Others thought it had been cloaked, hiding right beneath us all along. But the real fear came from what that meant. If it could hide, it might be thinking. Officials gave nothing away. Those familiar with intelligence protocols recognized what this was: full containment. Eventually, underwater probes were sent into parts of the structure. They showed long corridors, strange pulsing chambers, and then one probe just shut down, completely fried. After that, all footage was locked behind Pentagon firewalls. The pulsing signal changed, sped up, slowed down, like it was talking, but in a language no one could understand. And still, the beaches stayed shut. Florida's secret may sound unbelievable, but the ocean has surprised us before, with even older, stranger wonders hiding beneath its waves. The world's oldest sunken city. Just off the southern tip of mainland Greece, in the warm, shallow waters near Ponta Beach, lies something most people wouldn't believe if they weren't staring right at it. Beneath just a few feet of clear blue sea, you can make out stone walls, streets, even the outlines of homes and ancient tombs. It's not a myth or a story passed down through generations. It's real, it's mapped, and it is the oldest submerged city ever discovered.
In a way, this is like an underwater Pompeii. It's a settlement frozen in time.
This is Pavlo Petri, a Bronze Age town preserved underwater for thousands of years. Unlike most underwater ruins, it hasn't been distorted or buried over time. It's still there, almost like time just froze when the sea came in. The first clue that something ancient was hiding beneath the waves came back in 1904. A Greek geologist named Phokion Negris noticed the remains while surveying the coast. But his brief observation didn't lead to any deeper exploration. So for decades, Pavlo Petri went unnoticed. It wasn't until 1967 that the city was truly rediscovered, and this time by accident. A British marine geoarchaeologist, Nicholas Fleming, was in the area doing coastal surveys when a group of local campers pointed him to a shallow patch of sea. He looked through about 6 feet of crystal clear water and saw something incredible: patterns of walls and rooms stretching across the sea floor.
I looked at these rows of stones and I just had no idea what it was.
The next summer, a team from the University of Cambridge came out to map the site. They used hand tapes and a fixed grid system, simple tools by today's standards, but what they found was extraordinary. The submerged town spanned an area roughly 1,000 feet by 500 feet. That's about 7.5 acres. At least 15 buildings were identified, along with a street layout, open courtyards, 2 large tombs, and 37 box-shaped graves called cist graves. On the surface, they found pottery, obsidian, chert blades, and even a bronze figurine. All of it pointed to an active, lived-in settlement during the Bronze Age. At first, experts believed Pavlo Petri dated mainly to the Mycenaean period, roughly between 1,600 and 1,100 BCE. But that timeline was completely changed after 2 major surveys began in 2009. A new Greek-British team, led by the Ephorate of Underwater Antiquities and the University of Nottingham, returned with modern tools and deeper questions. They ended up mapping more than 97,000 square feet of additional buildings, including a long rectangular hall and a whole new street. And more importantly, they found pottery from the final Neolithic period, pieces that dated all the way back to around 3,500 BCE. That meant people were living in Pavlo Petri at least 1,000 years earlier than originally thought. It wasn't just Bronze Age, it was the Late Stone Age. So what was this place like before the sea swallowed it? The city plan, both from the original 1968 maps and the newer 2009 and 2010 surveys, shows a tightly organized layout. You can trace narrow lanes between houses, identify where homes had courtyards, and even follow drainage systems meant to manage water during rainstorms. In 2010, researchers digitally recorded over 430,000 square feet of structures, both previously known and newly discovered. They found broken roof tiles, gutter systems, massive storage jars, and piles of loom weights used in textile production.
These are used for hanging from a loom, for making textiles, essentially.
All of these point to a functioning coastal town, not a religious or ceremonial center. Families lived here. They stored goods, managed water, wove fabrics, and carried on daily life with a clear sense of structure and purpose. Pavlo Petri's location is no accident. The town sits in Vatica Bay, just across from the small island of Elafonisos. The shallow water, gentle waves, and easy shoreline access made it an ideal spot for beaching small boats. It likely served as a local port, handling trade goods from nearby regions and even distant places. Excavations in 2011 uncovered layers dating to the Neopalatial period, around 1700 to 1425 BCE. The presence of Cretan jars and the town's strong textile economies suggest Pavlo Petri had trade links with the powerful Minoan palaces of Crete. This wasn't some isolated outpost. It was part of the broader Aegean network, connected to a world far beyond the Greek mainland. But then the sea came in, and that raises the big question. How does an entire city end up underwater? The answer lies in 2 slow-moving but devastating forces: earthquakes and rising sea levels. Geological studies show that the town was gradually pushed downward by multiple seismic events. The first submergence likely happened sometime after 1000 BCE. More earthquakes followed, and by the second millennium CE, the town had sunk deep enough to be fully covered by the sea. At the same time, the Mediterranean itself was rising inch by inch. Eventually, the waves overtook Pavlo Petri completely. But unlike many other sites that were buried by later construction or farming, this place stayed untouched.
To be able to recreate the buildings and then hopefully to be able to give a fantastic impression of what the city would have once looked like.
No one built over it, no one dug it up. And that's what makes it so rare. It's a fully preserved prehistoric town, frozen just as it was. When the modern survey teams returned in 2009, they brought technology that transformed how underwater archaeology is done. Out went the hand tapes. In came robotic total stations and sector-scan sonar, tools that allowed them to record structures with extreme precision. A year later, they added stereophotogrammetry, which captured incredibly detailed three-dimensional images of walls and features, down to the millimeter. Then, in 2011, they teamed up with Australia's Centre for Field Robotics and deployed an autonomous underwater vehicle. It scanned the entire site and created a lifelike 3D model of the city, one that you can now explore virtually. This was one of the very first times such advanced imaging was used on a sunken city, and it changed the game entirely. What had once looked like scattered ruins now appeared as a full digital neighborhood you could walk through from your computer screen.
He wants him to try to digitally recreate Pavlo Petri.
Public interest skyrocketed after the 2011 BBC and Discovery Channel documentary, City Beneath the Waves, aired. Using those three-dimensional reconstructions, the film brought the daily life of Pavlo Petri into people's homes. Suddenly, this wasn't just an archaeological curiosity. It was a real place you could still visit, just by snorkeling in a shallow bay. Now, lots of places around the world claim to be sunken cities, but Pavlo Petri stands apart for two reasons: its age and how complete it is. That final Neolithic pottery proves people lived here as far back as 3500 BCE, and the city thrived right through the early and late Bronze Age. It's not just ruins, it's a full street plan with clearly marked homes, walls, and infrastructure. That's why Pavlo Petri is recognized by top organizations like UNESCO, National Geographic, and the World Monuments Watch as the world's oldest known submerged city with a preserved urban layout. But being underwater doesn't protect it from harm. Today, Pavlo Petri is at serious risk from modern threats. Small fishing boats and large yachts sometimes drag their anchors across the ruins, damaging ancient stones.
We can tell the courtyards because they have less stone, there's less rubble, they have lower walls.
Illegal hull cleaning operations dump chemicals into the bay. Curious visitors pick up pieces of pottery or move stones around, ruining the historical context. Even on shore, parking too close or camping on the dunes can damage parts of the site that are still on land. In 2016, UNESCO officially listed Pavlo Petri as an at-risk heritage site. The World Monuments Watch flagged the site too, pointing to pollution, infrastructure projects, and looting as urgent threats. That same year, the nonprofit ARCH helped push for greater global awareness and protection. Thankfully, some progress has been made. In 2018, Greece published formal archaeological boundaries for Pavlo Petri. The next year, a 40-page management plan was released to guide future protection efforts.
Working in collaboration with a team from the Greek Effort of Underwater Antiquities.
Floating buoys were installed to warn boats away from the ruins, though strong currents and theft have been a problem. Meanwhile, both local and international groups continue to monitor the bay, keeping tabs on vessel movements and raising alarms when boats anchor where they shouldn't. The shared goal is to strike a balance, allow people to experience this once-in-a-lifetime place, but without destroying it. And yes, you can still see it for yourself. On clear, calm days, snorkelers can glide over Pavlo Petri's streets and ruins with nothing more than a mask and fins. But there are rules. Don't touch anything, don't move stones, don't anchor over the site, and respect the signs and the fragile dunes on shore. The town rests in just 6 to 16 feet of water, so even amateur swimmers can witness this ancient marvel. But with that access comes responsibility. Because it's a city under the sea, some people love comparing Pavlo Petri to Atlantis. But the two have almost nothing in common. Atlantis is a myth, first written down by Plato around 2,400 years ago. Pavlo Petri was already ancient by then, and it sank due to very real geological forces, not fictional curses or divine punishment. But Greece doesn't hold the only city lost to the sea. Rome had one too. The Sin City that drowned. Baiae was ancient Rome's guilty pleasure, a resort town built for luxury, gossip, and power plays. West of Naples and tucked into the volcanic landscape of the Phlegraean Fields, it sat right on the coast, where hot mineral springs and calm waters made it the perfect escape for the rich and powerful. Emperors and elites built lavish villas that stepped down toward the sea, using marble, mosaics, and thermal baths to show off their wealth. But over time, the ground itself betrayed the party. Slowly, and then all at once, Baiae slipped beneath the water. And now, 2,000 years later, those sunken ruins make up one of the world's most stunning underwater archaeological parks.
Place the original statues, the mosaics and walls of the lost city of Baiae offer a glimpse.
People have been pulling Baiae's past out of the sea since the early 20th century. In the 1920s, workers using basic dredging tools near the shore started bringing up battered Roman statues. Most of them came from a submerged villa once linked to the imperial family. Newspapers at the time raised the alarm, calling for experts to step in before more damage was done. But it wasn't until the winter of 1969 that serious archaeology finally caught up. After a storm off the coast of Punta Epitafio, divers spotted marble figures lying on the sea floor. They had stumbled upon the remains of a banquet hall once connected to Emperor Claudius. Those statues were quickly raised and moved to a local museum to protect them, while replicas were placed underwater exactly where the originals had stood. That one moment triggered a wave of proper exploration. In 1980, archaeologists launched the first detailed underwater excavation in the bay. They mapped out the structure where those statues had been found. A dining hall styled like a sea grotto. It had once been lined with marble and fed by hidden channels of water that flowed through the room as elite guests lounged on curved couches to eat. Over the next few decades, researchers began to stitch together the full map of ancient Baiae. They used everything from tape measures to sonar to cutting-edge 3D photogrammetry. By the early 2000s, the area had been officially named the Underwater Archaeological Park of Baiae. Since then, visitors have been able to experience the ruins through glass-bottom boats, guided snorkels, or scuba dives, all carefully managed to avoid damaging the fragile site.
Tourists travel into the Naples Bay on glass boats to catch a glimpse of the ruins and sunken statues.
If you swim along the Punta Epitafio route, one of the park's most famous underwater trails, you reach the replica-filled Nymphaeum of Claudius. It sits about 23 feet underwater and measures roughly 60 feet by 30 feet. One end has a semicircular apse and a central pool, while the centerpiece is a large, curved couch, the stibadium, where guests would have reclined during banquets. On each long wall, 8 carved niches once held statues. The apse displayed a dramatic scene from Homer's Odyssey, showing Odysseus tricking the Cyclops with wine. Today, you can still see this underwater, thanks to exact replicas placed in the original positions. The real statues, including Odysseus holding a wineskin, are on display at the museum inside the castle of Baiae. As you move along the seabed, the city's layout begins to take shape. One structure, known as the Villa with the Propylaea entrance, still shows off a grand doorway and a large reception room. Its colorful marble floor, which covers over 2,000 square feet, has been carefully uncovered and preserved underwater. Another standout is the Villa of the Pisos, which sprawls across multiple terraces facing the bay. This estate once belonged to the influential Calpurnius Piso family, but was seized by the state after a failed plot to assassinate Emperor Nero. The area also includes roads and storefronts that used to line the edge of the Baianus Lacus, a lagoon that's now connected to the open sea. Scattered columns and mosaic fragments still sit where they fell, untouched for centuries. Baiae wasn't just about pleasure. Its location made it a strategic hotspot. In 37 BCE, Marcus Agrippa transformed nearby lakes Lucrinus and Avernus into a naval base called Portus Julius. He linked them to the sea through a series of canals, turning Baiae into the front yard of the Roman Navy's Western Fleet. Though the fleet later moved to Misenum, the military presence added another layer of importance to this already elite resort town. If you explore the underwater park today, you can still trace sections of the old harbor walls and follow ancient paved roads that once led to the fleet's installations. The coastline you see now doesn't match what the Romans knew. Back then, the inlets were narrower, the piers longer, and the shores more protected. So what pushed Baiae beneath the waves? It wasn't one dramatic event, but rather a slow, relentless process called bradyseism. This is a long-term cycle of the ground rising and sinking due to volcanic pressure. Baiae sits right on the Campi Flegrei caldera, one of the most dangerous volcanic areas in Europe. Geological studies show that parts of the town began sinking during the late Roman period and continued to drop into the early Middle Ages. Some Roman buildings now sit several yards below modern sea level. Even in recent years, the nearby city of Pozzuoli has experienced sudden uplift and tremors, reminding everyone that the ground in this region never really sleeps. Despite the centuries underwater, new discoveries are still being made. In 2023, conservators uncovered a detailed mosaic that had been hidden for years. A year later, in July 2024, a team revealed and restored a stunning marble floor from a villa's curved porch and main reception area. These finds are handled with extreme care. If they can be protected in place, they are.
suggestion that the building was some sort of storage depot. These jars could give clues as to who the city was trading with.
If removal is necessary, replicas are installed underwater while the originals are transferred to a museum for conservation. This approach makes sure the site stays alive for future generations. Even before the sea took it, Baiae had a reputation. Ancient Roman writers talked about it as the place where morals went to die. The biographer Suetonius claimed that Emperor Caligula once built a floating bridge across the bay just to ride a horse across it in a bizarre show of power. High above the waterline, massive ruins of bathhouses still stand, once mistaken for temples because of their grand design, and you don't need to be a professional diver to see it. On calm days, glass-bottom boats glide over mapped paths. In water as shallow as 10 to 15 feet, snorkelers can float above Roman streets and courtyards. Certified divers can explore deeper sections, reaching up to about 43 feet down. There are 8 main dive sites, including the Nymphaeum of Claudius, the villa with Propylaea entrance, the Piso's estate, and the remains of the old Navy harbor. Near a spot called Secca della Fumose, streams of gas bubbles still rise from the sea floor. Natural vents that hint at the sleeping volcano below and whisper the story of how Baiae sank and somehow survived. We've seen cities fall beneath the waves. Now meet a ship that took America's future with it. America's Gold Shipwreck. Before it became one of the biggest treasure stories in American history, the SS Central America was just a hard-working steamer doing its job.
The SS Central America is legendary among treasure hunters.
Launched in the year 1852 under the name George Law, it was later renamed and stretched 278 feet long, with side wheels that pushed it back and forth across the Panama route. It carried mail, people, and, most importantly, California gold from San Francisco to New York, using the narrow isthmus to speed up the trip. By the mid-1850s, this one ship was hauling a huge portion of the West's gold eastward, coins in crates, heavy gold bars from assayers, and miners' private stash bags. That gold wasn't just wealth, it was liquidity. It helped keep New York banks from collapsing during economic jitters. Her final voyage pulled all of that into one fateful run. In early September of 1857, 477 passengers and 101 crew members boarded the steamer in Panama, along with about 15 tons of gold in both coin and bar form, all bound for New York's banks. The ship stopped in Havana before turning north up the U.S. coast. But then, off Cape Hatteras, it sailed straight into a hurricane. As the storm raged, the hull began to leak. The boilers lost pressure, and eventually, the engines failed. Captain William Lewis Herndon rallied the crew into bucket lines and signaled for help. The brig Marine reached them in time to rescue women and children, while other survivors were pulled from the water later by ships like the Norwegian bark Ellen. But as night fell on September 12th, the SS Central America rolled over and sank, between 160 and 200 miles off the coast of the Carolinas. Around 425 people were lost. Only about 150 survived, and the gold that vanished with the ship helped push the U.S. into a financial crash.
Treasure hunters lusted after this ship. It had life-changing wealth, if they could only find it.
The Panic of 1857. For more than a century, the wreck sat undisturbed on the ocean floor, buried in silt nearly 2 miles below the surface, far too deep for any diver and well beyond the reach of salvage. But in the 1980s, everything changed. An engineer named Tommy Thompson raised about $12.7 million from 161 investors and launched a search based on detailed research. He and his team used ship logs, survivor testimonies, and storm models to build a probability grid. Then they towed side-scan sonar across the area, looking for any clue. On September 11, 1988, they dropped a remote-operated vehicle named NEMO from the research ship Arctic Discoverer. Nearly 7,200 feet down, the lights swept across an iron paddle wheel, and then over piles of gold. The wooden crates had rotted away, but the coins and bars were still there. The ship of gold had been found. That search, which combined math, modeling, and deep ocean robotics, became a case study in how to find lost wrecks.
That he sacrificed himself and was the first explorer to achieve a working presence in the deep ocean.
It was even published the following year in a peer-reviewed journal as a method for future deep-sea operations. But the discoveries didn't stop at sonar scans. When the cameras rolled, what they revealed was a time capsule. There were bright, untouched 1857S double eagles from the San Francisco Mint, huge assayer bars from Kellogg and Humbert and Just and Hunter, each marked with weight, fineness, and stamped dollar value, alongside personal items like pokes of miners' gold. rings, and stopped pocket watches. In the late 1980s and early 90s, the team worked under court supervision. They used underwater vacuums to sift through silt, carefully lifting trays and recording everything on video to preserve its location. These finds sparked a collector frenzy. The date 1857 became famous, and the massive gold bars, some weighing hundreds of troy ounces, became legendary symbols of the California gold rush. Ownership of the treasure wasn't simple. Legal battles over salvage rights went through federal admiralty court, and the site remained under court control for years. Eventually, after a long pause, the court appointed a receiver. In March of 2014, Odyssey Marine Exploration was granted permission to resume the recovery. Under the agreement, Odyssey would keep 80% of the proceeds until their expenses were repaid, and 45% after that. A research estimate pegged the remaining cargo's face value at around $760,000 in 1857 terms, not including any personal gold. That year, Odyssey mapped the entire site with a stitched photo mosaic before diving in. The season produced more than 15,500 gold and silver coins, 45 gold bars, nuggets, dust, jewelry, and countless personal belongings.
We found all of the high-end jewelry in a Gladstone bag, which is what the pursers would have used, and several rings.
A federal judge later awarded the company 100% of the fair market value for that recovery. Odyssey's report included some stunning numbers. They had logged 12,500 stitched images of the site and spent more than 2,000 hours underwater with the ROV over 129 days. The first few dives brought up 5 bars totaling about 1,000 troy ounces, worth roughly $1.2 million at the time. Later dives uncovered individual Kellogg and Humbert bars weighing as much as 300 troy ounces. Every piece, from the moment it was found on the seafloor to when it reached a museum or auction house, was documented. People could finally trace the gold's entire journey from shipwreck to showcase. And the value? That's where the story turns personal. After the first round of recoveries in the 80s and 90s, a California group bought much of the treasure, worth over $100 million, and began releasing it to the public through auctions. Single SS Central America double eagles have sold for 6-figure sums, and some assayer bars have reached hundreds of thousands of dollars. But behind the gold came drama. Tommy Thompson, the man behind the discovery, sold part of the treasure but didn't pay back investors. Legal battles followed. After he failed to appear in court in 2012, he was arrested in 2015 and jailed for civil contempt. He refused to say where 500 missing coins were. Then in February of 2025, a judge ended the civil contempt term but ordered him to serve a separate 2-year sentence for criminal contempt. Thanks for watching. See you in our next video.